Picture this. You're sitting in your living room when your phone rings. A familiar voice on the other end says something that makes you scream, "Oh shit," and bolt out of your house, so fast you don't even change out your flip-flops. 8 days later, your body is discovered in an abandoned conference room beneath a hole in a hotel roof. Your glasses and phone sitting mysteriously intact nearby. This isn't the beginning of a thriller novel. This is a true story of what happened one spring evening in Baltimore, and it's a mystery that will make you question everything you think you know about how people simply disappear. What could someone say in a phone call that would make an intelligent, successful man abandon everything he's doing and race into the night? What force could launch a human body with such precision that it would crash through a roof and land exactly where investigators found him? And why, in a city plagued by violence, did the police seem so eager to close this case before it was truly solved? We're about to enter a world where nothing is quite what it seems, where every answer only leads to more disturbing questions, and where the line between accident, suicide, and something far more sinister becomes impossibly blurred. In the late spring of 2006, Baltimore was a city that wore its scars openly. The police department was drowning in homicides. The medical examiner's office was overwhelmed. And in the shadows of the elegant Belvedere Hotel, something was about to happen that would haunt everyone who encountered it. Ray Rivera had the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. At 32, he possessed an athlete's build from his years playing water polo, an artist's soul from his passion for screenwriting, and a newlywed's optimism from his recent marriage to Allison. They had moved to Baltimore from California, so Ray could work for his high school friend Porter, writing financial newsletters for a company called Stansberry Research. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to build something together. But if you looked closer, if you paid attention to the small details that people usually miss, you would have noticed that something had begun to change in Ray's world. Something that would make perfect sense only after it was far too late to matter. The house alarm had been going off. Not once, but twice in the span of 2 nights, always at 1 a.m, always filling the quiet neighborhood with its piercing wail. The first time, Ray was terrified. The police came and suggested it might have been a squirrel. The second time, the night before everything changed, Ray seemed even more frightened. Allison noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of their living room windows looked like it had been tampered with from the outside. Think about that for a moment. Put yourself in Ray's shoes. You're lying in bed when your security alarm screams you awake at 1 a.m. for the second night in a row. You check the house, your heart pounding, and you find evidence that someone might have tried to get in. The police dismiss it as an animal, but you know what you saw. You know what you felt. Fear has a particular texture to it, doesn't it? It crawls under your skin and changes how you see everything around you. Allison had begun to notice that Ray was insisting on accompanying her almost everywhere, as if he was protecting her from something he couldn't name. Once, while she was jogging, a man approached her. Ray immediately ran toward the stranger, and the man quickly walked away. Ray never explained what he thought might happen. He never shared what was making him so afraid. On the morning of May 16th, Allison had to travel for business. Ray made her breakfast and walked her to the car, the way he had been doing more and more often lately. It was a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday, except for the weight of unspoken worry that seemed to follow Ray like a shadow. That afternoon, Ray did something interesting. He booked an editing suite for the weekend. He was working on a new screenplay, always the dreamer, always believing the next project would be the one to break through. He also had a long phone conversation with someone from the Freemasons about what was probably a script idea. Ray's mind worked that way, constantly spinning stories, constantly imagining what if scenarios that most of us would never think to explore. Between 4 and 6:30 that evening, Claudia, one of Allison's co-workers, was at the house. She was there when Ray's phone rang. She heard him answer it. heard the voice of whoever was on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. What she heard next would replay in her mind for years to come. Ray screamed, "Oh shit!" with such intensity, such alarm, that Claudia felt her own heart begin to race. Then she heard Ray running, actually running through the house. The front door slammed. A car engine started. Ray had left the house wearing flip-flops, driving Allison's black SUV like something was chasing him. But here's what makes this even stranger. Ray came back. He returned to the house briefly, then left again in the same vehicle. Claudia never saw him after that. No one did. Phone records would later show that the call came from the main switchboard at Agora Publishing, the parent company of Ray's workplace. But here's the thing about switchboards. They're designed to hide who's actually calling. Dozens of people could have made that call. The identity of the caller vanished in the maze of corporate phone systems like smoke disappearing into darkness. When you try to reach someone you love and they don't answer, there's a particular kind of anxiety that builds in your chest. Allison tried calling Ray multiple times that evening. His phone rang and rang, but he never picked up. By the next morning, when Claudia called to say Ray still hadn't come home, that anxiety had transformed into something much worse. Allison rushed back to Baltimore. When she walked into their house, she found Ray's laptop open on the kitchen counter, still glowing. Next to it sat his Invisalign retainer, a bag of chips, and a soft drink. It was as if Ray had been in the middle of a normal evening when something pulled him away. So suddenly, he didn't even think to close his computer. The search for Ray became a coordinated effort that consumed the city's attention. His family arrived from out of town. Volunteers combed through neighborhoods. Porter offered a reward and hired a private investigator. The local media picked up the story. For 6 days, Ray Rivera seemed to have simply vanished from existence. If you believe stories like this should be told, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. During those 6 days, there was no activity on Ray's cell phone, no charges on his credit cards, no sightings anywhere in the city. It was as if he had stepped through some invisible door and disappeared into another dimension entirely. Porter told a journalist during the search, "Ray is a happy guy. He and his wife had just booked a trip to New Mexico in a few weeks. This is not a man who wants to go away. I have to find my friend. I can't imagine my life without him. He's my best friend." On May 24th, 8 days after Ray disappeared, someone noticed something odd about the Belvedere Hotel. There was a hole in the roof of the lower section, a hole that hadn't been there before. When investigators looked through that hole, they found Ray's body in an unused conference room below. But finding Ray's body didn't answer the mystery. In many ways, only deepened it. The Belvedere Hotel is an elegant structure with multiple levels and sections. The hole in the roof was not directly below the main building where someone might jump. There was a significant horizontal distance between the hotel and where the hole appeared. For Ray to have created that hole by falling from the main roof, he would have needed to be moving horizontally at about 10 miles per hour when he went over the edge. That's a full running speed for someone in good athletic condition, wearing proper running shoes. Ray was found wearing flip-flops. Think about that physics for a moment. Try to imagine running at full speed in flip-flops. Try to imagine having only about 15 feet of rooftop space to build up that kind of momentum. The mathematics of it don't align with the reality of human limitations. Near the hole, investigators found Ray's eyeglasses and cell phone. Both were relatively intact, showing minimal damage despite the forces that had apparently killed Ray. How do you explain objects surviving unscathed when the person carrying them suffered fatal injuries? How do you explain the precise placement of these items, sitting there like evidence that had been carefully arranged? The medical examiner classified Ray's cause of death as undetermined. This wasn't a decision made lightly. In 2006, the Baltimore Medical Examiner's Office was overwhelmed with cases. About 20% of deaths in the city that year were labeled as undetermined, compared to 10% just 2 years earlier. When trained professionals can't determine how someone died, it usually means the evidence doesn't support any of the obvious explanations. According to Allison, a medical examiner official told her that Ray's broken shin bone was not consistent with the type of fall he supposedly suffered. Marie Dauenheimer, a certified medical illustrator, agreed that some of Ray's injuries didn't seem to result from an 11 to 14-story fall. She observed that fall victims who land feet first typically have severe foot injuries, and most injuries aren't predominantly on one side of the body. Most of Ray's injuries were on the left side of his body. Both Dauenheimer and forensic specialist Miriam Moya believe Ray's injuries were more consistent with someone who had been beaten to death or struck by a car. Moya pointed out that the broken strap on Ray's right flip-flop corresponded with how most of his injuries were on the right side of his body, suggesting he might have been dragged. After searching the house, Allison found something that would add another layer of mystery to an already incomprehensible situation. Behind Ray's computer, she discovered a note. It was folded very small and taped to the back of the machine, hidden like a secret. The note was unusual. It contained names of prominent Hollywood figures, movie titles, quotes from Freemasonry, and other seemingly random thoughts. It included a long list of family members and celebrities that Ray wanted to make 5 years younger. The note began with language related to Freemasonry. Brothers and sisters, around the world right now volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. The FBI analyzed the note and concluded it was not suicidal in nature. But if it wasn't a suicide note, what was it? Some people have speculated it might have been written in code, especially if Ray had connections with the Freemasons. Others wonder if it was research for a screenplay, given Ray's passion for writing. The note raises more questions than it answers, like everything else in this case. The police investigation was, to put it charitably, inadequate. Few, if any, photos exist of the crime scene, including Ray's body and his belongings found on the roof. On the day Ray's body was discovered, witnesses reported that police weren't looking for fingerprints in the area or placing Ray's belongings in evidence bags. Instead, some officers were seen laughing and tossing his possessions from the roof down to the room below. The police allowed Police Academy cadets to walk through the room on the same day Ray was discovered. The door to the room was left open, and the hallway wasn't even sealed off from the public. The parking garage and its video surveillance were never investigated. In a city overwhelmed by crime, it seemed like Ray's case was being rushed toward the simplest possible conclusion. But the simplest conclusion started falling apart the moment you examined it closely. The Baltimore Police Department seemed eager to label Ray's death a suicide, but the evidence told a much more complicated story. Remember that phone call? The one that made Ray scream and run out his house in flip-flops? We still don't know what was said during that conversation. We don't know who made the call. We don't know why it prompted such an extreme reaction from someone who had been calmly going about his afternoon just moments before. Remember the security alarms that had been going off for 2 nights in a row? The evidence that someone might have tampered with their window? Ray's increasing protectiveness of Allison, as if he sensed danger approaching from an unknown direction? Remember that Ray had left his job at Stansberry Research several months earlier? Between November and December the previous year, 3 significant events had occurred in Ray's life. He had gotten married. A colleague and friend named Tom had died in a car accident in Africa under circumstances that Ray found suspicious, and Ray had left his job. Ray suspected something wasn't right about Tom's death, but he never shared his concerns with anyone. What if Ray had stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to know? What if that knowledge made him a liability to someone with the power to make problems disappear? Porter Stansberry was reportedly under investigation for fraud around the time of Ray's disappearance. According to some sources, Ray wasn't happy with his work, because some of the stocks he was writing about weren't performing well, meaning anyone who bought them based on his recommendations would lose money. But to understand what Ray was really caught up in, you have to understand the shadowy world of financial newsletters. These aren't your typical Wall Street firms with glass offices and regulatory oversight. These are companies that operate in the gray areas of financial advice, targeting desperate investors with promises of insider knowledge and secret strategies. They sell hope to people who can't afford to lose what they're gambling with. When those hopes turn to devastating losses, when retirees lose their life savings based on a recommendation in a newsletter, the psychological weight falls on the writers. Ray wasn't just crafting marketing copy. He was essentially putting his name and credibility behind investment advice that was reaching thousands of people. Every stock he recommended that tanked wasn't just a number on a chart. It was someone's child's college fund disappearing, someone's retirement dreams crumbling. For a man with Ray's conscience, with his sense of responsibility, the weight of those failures would have been crushing. And in an industry where the line between optimistic analysis and deliberate deception can be razor thin, Ray may have found himself knowing things that made him uncomfortable, seeing patterns that made him question everything he was being asked to write. The week Ray disappeared, his house alarm went off twice, and on the night he vanished, he received that mysterious call from his old workplace. As the case developed, it emerged that Stansberry had obtained a gag order preventing employees from talking about Ray legally. No one from Agora was implicated in Ray's death, but according to reports, company personnel were advised not to speak about the case with the media or police. Stansberry continually refused to be interviewed about his missing friend, the same friend he had called his best friend during the search. Ray's brother Angel suggested that someone powerful might have lost a lot of money after one of Ray's stock recommendations didn't work out. In the world of high-stakes financial consulting, losing the wrong person's money can have consequences that extend far beyond mere embarrassment. But even if we accept that Ray's death was connected to his work, we're still left with the impossible physics of how his body ended up where it was found. The horizontal distance, the precise impact point, the intact glasses and phone, the injuries that didn't match the supposed cause of death, all these elements suggest something far more complex than a simple fall. Some have theorized that Ray might have been killed elsewhere, and his body placed in the conference room to make it look like an accident or suicide. Others have suggested he might have been thrown from a helicopter, though experts have dismissed this theory for various logistical reasons. Still others believe he was lured to the hotel under false pretenses, and something went wrong. But there's another theory that haunts those who have studied this case most carefully. What if Ray was taken to that hotel against his will? What if someone made him believe Allison was in danger, or that he needed to come immediately to save someone he cared about? What if he ran out of his house that evening not because he was suicidal, but because he thought he was being a hero? Picture this scenario. Someone Ray trusted calls and tells him there's an emergency at the hotel. Maybe they claim Allison has been hurt, or that Porter is in trouble and needs his help immediately. Ray, being the kind of man who would run toward danger to protect the people he loved, doesn't hesitate. He doesn't even change out his flip-flops because every second counts when someone you care about is in peril. He arrives at the hotel, maybe through a service entrance or a parking garage where security cameras conveniently weren't working. He's led upstairs, perhaps to what he's told is where his wife or friend is waiting. Picture the Belvedere Hotel at night, its grand corridors dimly lit, the kind of place where footsteps echo and shadows seem to move on their own. Ray would have been running on pure adrenaline, his heart pounding not from fear for himself, but from desperation to reach whoever needed his help. Maybe he was told to go to a specific floor, a specific room. Maybe someone was waiting for him there, someone he trusted enough to follow without question. The predatory psychology at work here is chilling in its simplicity. Take someone's greatest strength, their willingness to sacrifice for others, and turn it into the weapon that destroys them. Ray's mind would have been racing with scenarios, planning how to help, what he could do, never imagining that his heroic instincts were being used against him. In those final moments, he probably still believed he was saving someone. The person who orchestrated this understood Ray's psychology perfectly, knew that a protective nature would override any sense of self-preservation. But instead of finding the people he came to save, he finds something else entirely. Whatever happened in that hotel room, it wasn't the peaceful conversation that would lead someone to jump. The evidence suggests a struggle, a confrontation, something that went wrong for everyone involved. What happened in that hotel room will probably never be known for certain. But the evidence suggests it wasn't a peaceful conversation that ended with Ray choosing to jump through a roof. The trajectory of his fall, the pattern of his injuries, the intact condition of his personal belongings, all of these point to something far more sinister than suicide. There's a psychological profile that emerges when you study cases like this. Cases where successful people with bright futures suddenly find themselves in impossible situations. These aren't random events. They happen to people who have seen too much, who know too much, who represent some kind of threat to others with more power and fewer scruples. What makes cases like Ray's so disturbing is how ordinary the victims appear from the outside. They're not whistleblowers or investigative journalists actively seeking danger. They're regular people who stumble into knowledge they were never meant to have, who ask the wrong questions at the wrong time, who possess inconvenient information simply by being in the wrong place when secrets are being shared. The psychological isolation begins long before the physical threat materializes. First comes the paranoia, which others dismiss as stress or overwork, then the hypervigilance, the constant looking over shoulders, the protective behaviors that seem excessive to friends and family. Ray's insistence on accompanying Allison everywhere wasn't romantic devotion. It was a behavior of someone who knew that danger could strike at any moment and that the people he loved might be used as leverage against him. What's most tragic is that these victims often can't articulate their fears because they don't fully understand them themselves. They sense wrongness, feel the weight of invisible eyes watching, but they can't point to concrete evidence. So they suffer in isolation, their mounting anxiety dismissed as mental health issues by people who can't see the very real threats closing in around them. Ray wasn't just a dreamer, writing financial newsletters. He was an intelligent man with connections to people involved in questionable business practices. He had access to information that could potentially damage careers and cost millions of dollars. In a world where money talks louder than morality, sometimes knowing the wrong thing can be more dangerous than any physical threat. Think about the timing of everything that happened to Ray. The alarms going off just days before his disappearance. The apparent tampering with his house. His increasing paranoia and protectiveness of his wife. These aren't the behaviors of someone planning suicide. These are the behaviors of someone who knows he's being watched. Someone who senses that danger is closing in but doesn't know where it will come from or when it will strike. The phone call that triggered everything wasn't random. It was carefully planned, perfectly timed, and designed to exploit Ray's greatest weakness, his love for the people in his life. Whoever made that call knew exactly what to say to make Ray drop everything and come running. They knew his psychology, his patterns, his vulnerabilities. What's perhaps most chilling about this case is how easily it could have been dismissed as a simple suicide if not for persistence of Ray's family and the attention of investigative journalists. In a city overwhelmed by violence, one more jumper wouldn't have raised many eyebrows. The case would have been closed, the files would have been archived, and Ray Rivera would have become just another statistic in Baltimore's crime database. But Ray's story refuses to stay buried. It continues to haunt not just because of the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death, but because of what it reveals about how vulnerable we all are to forces beyond our understanding or control. How many other cases like this have been quietly swept under the rug? How many other people have disappeared into the shadows of corporate corruption and official indifference? The Belvedere Hotel still stands in Baltimore, its elegant facade hiding the secrets of what happened in that conference room so many years ago. Visitors to the city probably walk past it every day without knowing they're passing the site of one of America's most baffling unsolved mysteries. The hole in the roof has long since been repaired, but the questions it raised remain as sharp and unanswered as ever. Ray left behind a wife who still seeks justice, a family that refuses to accept easy answers, and a legacy that extends far beyond the financial newsletters he wrote. His story has become a symbol of how power can corrupt, how the truth can be buried, and how ordinary people can find themselves caught in extraordinary circumstances that destroy everything they hold dear. In the end, what happened to Ray on that spring evening in Baltimore may never be fully explained, but his case serves as a reminder that in our modern world, where surveillance cameras watch our every move and digital trails track our every action, it's still possible for people to simply vanish, taking their secrets with them into the silence. The truth about Ray's death lies somewhere in the shadows between what we know and what we can prove, between the official explanation and the whispered theories that circulate among those who refuse to accept that such a complex mystery could have such a simple solution. And perhaps that's the most disturbing aspect of this entire case. Not just that Ray Rivera died under such mysterious circumstances, but that we live in a world where such mysteries are possible at all. We tell ourselves that technology has made us safer, that surveillance cameras and digital footprints make it impossible for people to simply vanish. But Ray's case proves how naive that assumption really is. Our interconnected world has created new vulnerabilities, new ways for predators to track and manipulate their victims. The same phones that were supposed to keep us connected became the instruments of Ray's destruction. Consider how many other Ray might be out there right now. People who know too much, who've seen something they shouldn't have, who are living with that growing sense of dread that something terrible is approaching. How many are dismissed as paranoid when they're actually being hunted? How many disappearances get filed away as suicides or accidents because the truth is too complicated for overwhelmed authorities to pursue? The Ray Rivera case forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality, that in our modern world, the illusion of safety is just that, an illusion, that the people we trust, the institutions we rely on, the technology we depend on, can all be turned against us by those with enough power and motivation to do so. Ray Rivera was 32 years old when he died. He was a husband, a brother, a son, and a friend. He was a man with dreams and aspirations, fears and hopes, just like any of us. And on May 16, 2006, he answered a phone call that changed everything. Picture this. You're sitting in your living room when your phone rings. A familiar voice on the other end says something that makes you scream and bolt out of your house, so fast you don't even change out of your flip-flops. But this time, instead of wondering what could make someone react that way, remember that the person who answered that call was real, and the mystery of what happened to him remains unsolved, a question mark hanging over Baltimore like a shadow that refuses to fade, even as the years pass and the city moves on, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps running through a house in flip-flops, and the sound of a door slamming shut for the last time,